How's it going, everyone? This is Mike. Welcome back to another chat video. The topic of this chat is what are some of the films that are assumed to be lost or known to be lost that you would most like to see found, discovered, and put out there so that people could finally see them. What are the films that you would most like to have discovered? There are a lot of lost films out there. Something like I don't know what is the amount of films that have been made during the entire cinematic era. Something like 70% have been lost or something like that, especially silent films. So yeah, very good topic. Now this topic was suggested by a guy named Ethan Elliott, who is one of my YouTube friends, and he's put responses on several of my videos. And about a week or so ago, he suggested this chat topic to me, and I thought that is a great idea. Maybe we can do something with that. And I didn't do anything about it. And when all these this sort of onslaught of chat videos came out, it came back into my head. But he also suggested it to my friend Ian, All Things Film. And Ian has responded by starting this chat. So thanks both to Ian and to Ethan, because this is a very good idea. Thanks. And I'm sorry I didn't get to this sooner. But anyway, here we go. So I also read Ethan's response to Ian's video. And Ethan listed the films that he would most likely to see. And the first one he talked about is the first one that I'm going to talk about. And I can't help it because it is my #1 film that I would most like to find. That is the 1927 silent film London After Midnight, directed by Todd Browning, and it starred Lon Chaney. That's Lon Chaney Sr. in a film that is probably the most desired by horror film fans and fans of old movies. Both would love to see found. And Ethan knew some details about it. I didn't know that the last known version of this film was lost in a fire in 1965. I believe that's what he said. I knew that there were segments of the film that were found and maybe even known to exist today, maybe a small part of it. But I don't think it would just be amazing if somebody would find this movie. All kinds of stills exist that you can see. The weird makeup that Lon Chaney is wearing. Of course, this is a murder mystery / horror film with a vampire slant to it. And this was remade in 1935, again by Todd Browning, as the film Mark of the Vampire at MGM, starring Bela Lugosi and Lionel Barrymore, which is also one of my favorite films. But a lot of people said that London After Midnight was really a fantastic movie, so I would love to see that discovered. And who knows, maybe someday I will. Maybe someday. Now, another film, a silent film that I would love to find is the 1918 version of Cleopatra, starring Theda Bara. Now, I talked about Theda Bara a couple of videos ago when I compared her to Marilyn Monroe, because Theda Bara was probably the first movie sex symbol in the 1910s, right? And she made something like 40 films between 1914 and 1919. And then she left films and worked on the stage for a while, made a one-film comeback in 1925, which was not terribly successful, and that film does exist. And then she made a short comedy film in 1926, which does exist also, and you can find it on YouTube, called Madam Mystery, and that was the end of her show business career, or at least film career. I think she did some vaudeville after that and some radio. But all of her films are thought to be lost except for the very first film she starred in, which was A Fool There Was, back in made at the very end of 1914 and played during 1915. And there's another film called East Lynne, which was I think from 1917, maybe 1918, I'm not sure. And that actually still does exist. In fact, I've ordered a copy of that, and I'm hoping to be getting it the next week or so. But everything else she did is thought to be lost. There was a big fire at 20th Century Fox in 1937, and all of her films went up in flames. I don't know why somebody preserved the first one and that later film But that's all we have of Theodora. Now, she made this version of Cleopatra. There are something like 400 still photographs from this film. Outrageous makeup and costumes and just wild decor. And I guess it was just a really insane film. And she was wearing a lot of totally revealing outfits, which 10 years down the road, when they had the code coming out, there's no way in the world they would have allowed somebody to wear those kinds of clothes. Anyway, supposedly there is just a very tiny, maybe a few seconds of film from Cleopatra which is known to exist. And it would be just amazing if somebody would find that in somebody's basement or somebody's attic, which is where they usually find these things. That would really be something. Or any of her other films, for that matter, because Theodora is a very enigmatic figure now. Most of the things that she did that made her famous don't exist anymore. It would be really cool to see some of those things. Now, there are some segments of other films that I would like, not necessarily entirely lost films, but just parts of films that I would love to see discovered. And number one on that list would be from the magnificent Ambersons, which came out in 1942, directed by Orson Welles, considered to be I mean, it really is a wonderful film. But it's also known that when Orson Welles completed the film, and then he had to leave the country to do another film, and he left the editing up to the people at RKO. Well, RKO was remembering how Citizen Kane did not work out financially the way they had hoped, so they decided to cut the hell out of Magnificent Ambersons, make it shorter, and make it more, sort of like upbeat at the end, all sorts of things. So a lot of it was cut out. I don't really remember exactly how much was cut out, but a lot of it is lost. And supposedly they just threw it all away. They didn't even store it in some, metal box somewhere, thinking someday somebody might want to see this. Maybe Orson Welles might want to see it. They just pitched it. So it would be amazing to see some of that again. And let's see, there was another one. Let me think. Also the 1954 version of A Star Is Born, starring Judy Garland and James Mason, which is a great, great film. When it first was made, it was something like 3.5 hours long, something like a very long film. It had an intermission, and they had spent a lot of money on it. The Warner Brothers studio, Jack Warner, had spent a lot of money on this film, and he was upset when the film first came out because it was so long. They couldn't have several showings in one night if it were only maybe 90 minutes long, right, or something like that. And he was upset that he was not getting his money back very quickly. So he pulled the film and he chopped the hell out of it. And a lot of those things. So it became less successful after it was put back in theaters in a shorter version, and it never did make back. Well, maybe eventually it did, but it didn't do very well financially or for a lot of audiences. It didn't have the continuity that the original had. So anyway, some of that footage has been found, and they've put the film back together as best they could with the little bit of footage that they found, musical numbers and all that, and also still photographs with audio that they found. So it would be nice if they could just find all the footage somewhere. The Warner Brothers did keep a lot of that, and it was found sometimes in unmarked containers. They didn't know exactly what it was. Oh, wow, it's Judy Garland singing. So yeah, that would be cool. And another film that I was thinking of, in 1977, there was a film came out called I Never Promised You a Rose Garden, which was based on a book by the same title by an author named Hannah Green. I remember reading that book back in 1969. It was a very good book. It was about a young woman who was mentally disturbed, and she was covering up the painful reality of her life by creating this entire civilization in her mind that was more real to her than her real life. It was sort of a prehistoric civilization, something you might see in Lord of the Rings, weird creatures and savagery and all this sort of thing. And so I finally got around to seeing this movie maybe 20, 25 years ago. I read it on VHS, and I liked it, but it wasn't nearly as good as the book. And what they did in the film, they just sort of alluded to this this civilization that this girl had created. The girl was played by Kathleen Quinlan, and they didn't. In the book, they had page after page, chapters filled up with the activities of these gods and goddesses and the creatures in this world that she had created. It was fascinating. But in the film, they didn't show very much of it. Now, I found out later that Barbara Steele actually was in this movie, and she played a goddess in this created fantasy world. And according to her, they had shot something like 20 minutes of film, and then they cut out almost all of it, and everything that she did was on the cutting room floor. So my main reason for wanting to see the film was because I knew that she was in the cast, and then I saw it and I thought, where is she? And then they rolled the end credits and her name was in it, but she wasn't in the film. So I would very much like to know if some of that footage still exists. I know that film has come out on I think it's come out on DVD, but I don't think they have that in the extra features. So, yeah, those are my choices for films that lost films that I would like to see. So I guess that's pretty much all. I'd probably think of more if I sat down and concentrated. But anyway, thanks again to Ethan for this interesting chat topic, and comments are welcome.